emotions or they accumulate problems and injustices. So yeah, so we both see as now with the social media and people voice their concern easily, whereas before, unless you're on TV or you're a leader in your town, or, then you have no voice. Whereas now, all of us can create a blog, we can advocate and tell all of the staff association about community work or about anything. And so we feel very empowered to do something.
Great. How about some other thoughts? Please.
May I share?
Well, this group right here talked a little bit in the little time that we had. Trend number 8. And it's amazing how we can all relate to the fact that in the workplace, because something has been done a certain way for as long as anyone can remember, that's what we keep doing over and over. And we talk about how uncomfortable it is to get out of that and try something new. And one reason would be the fact that it's still working. The status quo is still working. And so maybe we need to take a look at that and how do we measure if it's working really optimally and producing the kinds of results that we want to see, and therefore we might take the risk of doing or trying something else.
Yeah, that's a great point. And sometimes people ask, like, who is it working for? Right? So that next level of conversation is an important one too. It's working. Is it working for everyone that we intended to work for? Please.
And I think the fear of failure, even if there's a 90% success rate or prediction of this new way, we focus on the 10%. Well, what if? And I look at Thomas Edison. I don't remember the number, but I know there's a very large number of attempts that he made in creating a light bulb. And when asked about it, he said, well, I learned from the 12,000 ways of making light bulbs, those weren't the way. And that's what we have to be ready to accept and to sit down as a group and say, okay, well, we tried this, it didn't work well, so we know not to do it again that way. But let's sit down, what worked, what didn't work? How can we use this experience to get better?
Yeah, that's really very nicely said. I think there's one of the things that we talk about, and Luana can tell you more about this. We talk about this leadership idea that what would it look like in the world if we focused on those things we did well, if we rigorously examine those things with the same amount of energy we use to examine when we screw up, and then we ask ourselves, how do we do more of that, right? That's a very different starting point than how organizations traditionally start, which is like, we screwed up, let's list a bunch of different reasons as to why we screwed up, and let's do something slightly different.
And never do them again.
And never do them again, right? And my way of thinking is that destroys efficacy, right? If we know efficacy is important, like our belief in our own ability to do something is exceedingly important as to whether or not we'll actually be able to do it, if we start from the point of failure, then we're not starting from our best selves, right? And then it inhibits innovation, tinkering, because your incremental success is one thing, but if you want to make fundamental paradigm shifts in where we're going, you can't tinker. You've got to really consider different ways of doing things, right? So as an organization, what would it look like if we really rigorously went out and investigated all the excellence that already resides on the campus? We sort of assume, yeah, it's there, maybe it's there, but then we don't invest any energy in thinking about how do we rigorously examine it, right? That to me is a starting point. And that's what I loved about your comment. Edison wasn't hung up in all that. It took him 12,000 ways to discover how to make a light bulb, which is critical. Thank you. How about one other comment, please?
So our group talked about the first trend, which is one of the ones that we experience quite frequently on campus, actually, where sometimes you'll have people who, for instance, will be in that bracket of retirement. They'll retire. They'll come back as consultants. But they'll be consulting with someone who has taken over their former position. So that new person in that old position is working with the old person from the old position, and sometimes that can really squelch the innovation because you don't want to offend or step on feet or and then that person who may be back as a consultant may be quite wed to the way it was done, the same way it had been done for however many years they held that position, the contacts they knew to reach out to make that position successful. And so the innovation at that next tier of the younger leadership that needs to fall on their face to learn, that needs to find their own path, that needs to, or might have a different network that they can access for different, perhaps better resources and feedback, gets capped, because you don't want to offend that knowledgeable entity from whom you still require information or guidance or what have you. And I think that sometimes that can be quite a predicament and also quite a lost